Hi everyone, it's me Nathan again, and today I just wanted to try and get something off my chest first. I've been thinking about making an SMG4 I've been thinking about making a modern SMG4 criticism video. I've been thinking about making it. Wait, hang on. I've been thinking about making an SMG4, a modern SMG4, a modern era SMG4 criticism video sometime soon, and this is this is just supposed to be me criticizing one SMG4 episode that I've actually been thinking of, and I feel like I just need to get it off my chest. And before we start this video, please don't take any of it personal. Please don't take any of the things I say personally. I'm only criticizing the episode. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm only criticizing the episode and just how and just some of the criticisms I have for it and problems I have with it, as well as what Luke and Kevin can do in the future to prevent making these kinds of what should I say? These kinds of issues that I have. So please don't take any of it personally. I'm just criticizing the episode, and that episode in question you're thinking of is one that I feel like is one that is an SMG4 episode that came out a year ago. And the name of the episode is SMG4 Boys vs. Girls, and I didn't do a criticism video on this back then just because I didn't think of doing one, and I really doubt anyone was going to watch the video anyways, if I was thinking about doing it, but I'm not even sure if anyone's going to watch this one. But in case anyone does, which there'll probably be some people that will, probably in this episode of SMG4 was uploaded a year ago. In this episode of SMG4 was uploaded a year ago, so it's not really a new video. It was uploaded a year ago, and I feel like it's probably one of the it's probably one of the most heavily criticized videos of SMG4's modern era. I feel like SMG4 Boys vs. Girls is probably the most criticized video, or one of the most criticized videos of SMG4's modern era. And if you haven't seen the episode, I would strongly encourage you to go check it out first, just so you can see where I'm coming from and just so you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen the video for yourself, go ahead. I strongly recommend that you go ahead and check it out just so you know what I'm talking about. But if you have already, then I'll just go ahead and quickly summarize it in about 1 or 2 minutes. I'll just go ahead and quickly summarize it from what I can remember, because I actually haven't seen the episode myself ever since it first came out. So, but I can summarize a little bit of it for you. So, if you haven't seen the episode, basically the episode from what I can remember, so if you haven't seen the episode, basically what the episode is about is Mario and, basically what the episode is about is, well, obviously, like in the title, it says boys versus girls, so Mario, Bowser, Axel, I think Shroomy, and, I think Fishy Boopkins and Bob was there. Yeah, I know Bob was there. I'm really sure Bob was in the episode. I'm not sure if Fishy Boopkins was. I think he was too, but anyways, it was basically the boys team, which is Mario, which at the time was, from what I can remember, Mario, Bowser, Axel. I'm not sure about Toad. I don't think he was, or at least for most of it. I'm really sure Shroomy, Bob, and I think Fishy Boopkins were part of it too. I actually don't remember. Like I said, I haven't seen the episode for a year now, so sorry if I mess up some stuff, but. And then the girls' side, which is Meggy, Tari, Psycho, and I think that was about it. There might have been another character, but I already forgot. But Meggy, Tari, and Psycho versus Mario, Bowser, Axel, and a couple of other characters. So basically what the episode is about. So basically the episode is about, well, those characters being on the boys' side and girls' side, of course, and trying to figure out and trying to do their worst with pranks, and trying to make the best pranks, and see which side could do the most pranks, which most of them on the girls' side really weren't even pranks. If anything, they were just a whole lot worse than pranks that they really weren't even pranks at all. But basically, the biggest problem I have with this episode is how hypocritical the girls' side is towards the end of the episode is probably the biggest problem I feel like a lot of us had with this episode. So basically, like I said, it was to see who could do the best pranks, and who would win, from what I can remember. And feel free to correct me down in the comments if I get anything wrong, because I haven't watched this episode since it first came out a year ago. And so yes, basically it was about that, and sometime during a couple minutes into the episode, Meggy says, do your worst to the boys, and like Meggy says, they try to do their worst, which, if anything, if you've seen the episode, then you would know that what the boys did in the end was pretty much just, I would think, pretty much any normal prank, except for maybe the last one, but even the last one I'm really sure wasn't completely intentional, I think, but either way, that's not entirely the point. What the point is Meggy says, do your worst, and the boys, well, of course, do their worst, or at least try to, and I already forgot most of the pranks the boys did, except for the last one, which I'm not sure if it was part of the plan or not. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be an accident, but even then, it was not nearly as bad as what the girls did for most of their pranks. It wasn't nearly as bad as most of the pranks the girls did. And basically what happened is that Tari ended up getting knocked over by a bear, from what I remember. She ended up getting knocked over by a bear, and then, of course, she started crying, of course. And Meggy, Tari, and Psycho said that you took it too far, even though, and the problem with that, though, is one, that's very hypocritical, because one, Meggy, a couple of minutes ago, you just said, do your worst, and that's what they did. And second, most of the pranks you did were far worse than what any of the pranks the boys did for the most part. Like, for example, I think Bowser, or some of the characters on the boys' side get eaten by a giant Asian fish. I think it was, I forgot exactly what kind of fish it was called, but they got eaten by a giant Asian fish, got swallowed in whole by a giant Asian fish, I think, made it look like Axel was sexually assaulting Carl Wheezer, and the last one is Meggy putting too much spice in, and I'm really sure the last one, or one of the last ones, was Meggy putting too much spice in Mario's spaghetti, and then Mario ends up eating it, and he ends up catching on fire and burning to death. And ends up catching on fire because of how spicy his spaghetti was, and ends up catching on fire and probably burning up. So, if anything, that's very hypocritical coming from them. That's probably like I said, the biggest problem with this episode was how hypocritical the girls were, and I'm really sure that even if you don't agree with me for some reason, which I wouldn't know why, you can at least see where I'm coming from, because one, like I just said, the pranks that the girls did weren't even pranks. They're the ones that took it very far. And not to mention, towards the end of the episode, the boys are the ones who have to apologize, and yet the girls never apologize for all the pranks they did, which, of course, weren't really even pranks. In fact, if anything, they were terrible. Like I just said, one was, well, some of the boys getting eaten by a giant Asian fish. The other one was Axel. The other one was, I think, Psycho, throwing a spiked ball at Bowser, and his hand gets, and then he gets poked, and, well, he doesn't get poked. It goes right through his hand, because it's a spiked ball. And the second one, I think, was Axel. They made it look like Axel was they made it look like Axel was sexually assaulting, I think, Carl, I think. And the last one, I think, and then I'm really sure the last one was Meggy putting too much spice in Mario's spaghetti, and then Mario ends up eating the spaghetti, and he ends up catching on fire and probably burning up. And comparing all the things I just said to what happened to the one the boys did, and comparing all of those, every single one of those, that the girls did compared to what the boys did, it really isn't even comparable at all. And if anything, I feel like it's the girls that took it way too far, since the pranks they did really weren't even pranks in the first place. Especially since they never apologized to the boys. Especially since towards the end of the episode, the girls never apologized to the boys for all the stuff they did. Which that's probably the biggest problem with the episode, and probably one of the only problems I have with the episode, especially since, well, the episode didn't really feel that funny. In fact, it felt very, well, like I said, hypocritical. And one last time, like I said, comparing all the stuff the girls did to what the boys did, I'm really sure it's not comparable at all to what the girls did. And especially since, well, one, they don't even apologize towards the end of the episode. It's the boys that only apologize and not the girls, which is not fair at all, especially considering the stuff the girls did was, especially since the pranks that the girls did were far worse than any of the pranks the boys did for the most part. Especially comparing all those things I just said the girls did to Tari getting knocked down by a bear and her just crying because of it. I'm really sure that if anything, the girls are the ones that did their worst, and they're the ones that should be apologizing the most. And the worst thing is that they don't even apologize either at the end of the episode. It's just the boys. So if anything, I feel like both of them should have apologized. Of course, I'm not really sure why the boys would even apologize in the first place, especially considering, like I said, what the girls did the pranks the girls did were far worse than what any of the pranks, for the most part, the boys did. And even though, I understand why, because, yes, of course, Tari did get knocked over by a bear, but considering all the other things that the girls did, which were obviously far worse than what any of the pranks the boys did, from what I remember, for the most part. And especially since Meggy said, do your worst, it's very hypocritical. It's very hypocritical coming from Meggy and the girls, too, and very unfair. So, considering all those things that the girls did, it probably should have been the girls apologizing as well, if not just them, because of what they did. Especially since Tari getting knocked over by a bear was not anything, really wasn't anything compared to the rest of the stuff they did for the most part. So, what I feel like would have made this episode better is, one, if anything, the girls for the most part, the girls not being hypocritical at all when it came to what the boys did, especially since, like I just said a million times already, what the boys did, which was, well, Tari gets knocked down by a bear, from what I remember. If anything, that isn't anything compared to what the girls did. If anything, just go watch the episode for yourself and you'll know what I mean. And what I feel like would have made this episode better is if the girls apologized as well, and they weren't hypocritical in the first place. And they weren't hypocritical in the first place, especially considering, well, of course, all the other things the girls did. So I feel like what made this episode better is the girls also apologizing, if not them just apologizing, especially considering what they did was far worse than what any of the pranks the boys did for the most part. So I feel like, if anything, either both of them should have apologized. So I feel like the girls' side, the girls should have apologized as well, if not just them, because of what they did, especially considering the stuff they did was far worse than what the boys did for the most part. The other thing I feel that this episode could have been done better in this episode is them having a fair match between both sides, especially and pulling actual pranks rather than just basically killing rather than basically killing each other. So, I feel like those are a couple of things this episode could have done better, especially getting rid of the hypocritical parts coming from Meggy and the girls' side, because what they did was far worse than pretty much any of the pranks, for the most part, from what I remember, than the boys did in the first place. So, if anything, I feel like the girls should have apologized too, if not just them, for what they did, because if anything, pretty much all the pranks they did after Meggy saying "do your worst" was basically just the girls' side killing each other. Was basically just the girls' side just injuring and killing each other and killing all the other boys. Well, killing them, because of course they didn't actually die, but still, it doesn't actually make it any better, especially considering what they did. So, I feel like those are some things this episode could have done better, and I felt like the episode was very hypocritical. So I feel like some of those things would have made this episode better, and if anything, it probably would have been better off if this episode didn't happen in the first place. So that's pretty much the small little criticism video I've had. So I feel like those are some of the things that Luke and Kevin can do better in the future, or if they decide to do a video like this in the future. Get rid of the hypocritical parts, of course. 2, make it a fair match. 2, make it actually fair and make it actual pranks or whatever they're going to be doing if they do try to do this again. And number 3, if something like this were to happen, have both sides apologize, or just the one that did the work, that encouraged them and did stuff that was far worse than the other side, have them apologize in the first place for what they did. Those are some of the things I feel like this episode could have done better, but if anything, in general, I feel like this episode probably shouldn't have happened in the first place, but that's pretty much all I have to say for this criticism video, because this video is almost 20 minutes long, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video right here, and make sure you put down the comments too on what Luke and Kevin could, and what this episode and Luke and Kevin can do better in the future, as well as point out some of your points as well, and why you agree or don't agree with me. So make sure to put that stuff down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.